this was until the last about 30 years, until the late 1980s. You walk around today and you notice somebody wearing a pair of Techeles on their tzitzis, blue on their tzitzis. Very slight chance that it's the Radziner Techeles. There's literally no chance that it's Rav Herzog's Yantina, which they couldn't produce, came out any blue dye. And chances are that it's the newest candidate, which is the murex trunkless. So you assume that there's such a understanding murex trunkless is Techeles. There must be some Mikar, some Remez, some Gematria, something. Where is it coming from? Where is this first source that this is the Chilazim? Truth is, there are thousands of snails, thousands and thousands of snails, and they're aware now of over 200 snails that produce dye, that could adhere to wool. So why did they pick this one? So I'll tell you the real truth. Rabbi Herzog, when he was writing his thesis, and he felt that he discredited the Radziner Techeles, so he looked back and there was a study done in the late 1850s, 1860s, and there was a fellow, not a Yid, he was a Goy. Maybe he was a biblical scholar. No, he wasn't a biblical scholar. He wasn't a priest. He knew nothing about Yiddishkeit. He knew nothing about Chazal and the Simoni Chazal. His name was Dr. Alexander Dedkin. What was his stella? He was a keeper of the Museum of Egyptian Antiquities in Vienna. That was his Grace stella. He wrote 4 books. In the 4th book, he bases his research on something that was done by another guy in the 1857, and he said that they knew by then they knew of 5 snails that produced dye. That's what they were aware of then, and they had certain research that was done. We'll see that they even had it in the time of Chazal, and that there was a dyeing process, there was a dyeing industry earlier, and based on the fact that they were aware of these 5, he went and he made a calculation. There's the Papurul Apilis, there's the Murex Arinicius, there's the Murex Trunculus, there's the Murex Brandaris, and there's the Papura Hastima, something like that. Hamastoma. Now, this doctor, Alexander, Dedkin, he must have had some Makar, but he for some reason assumed that Techeles in the Torah, there's 2 things. There's Techeles and there's Argamon. Argamon is more purplish reddish, and then there's Techeles, which is also purple blue. That was his hanocha, that it's purple blue, which we obviously have Messiah we have a Messiah, came out everybody that it's blue. And based on his assumptions, he said that, well, it can't be the Herstoma and the Brandaris. They produce more of a reddish purplish, so that's out. Out of the other 3, he said that the Arichoris it secretes a very little secretion. So even though Itaka produces a bluish purple, but there's so little secretion that it produces, it's unlikely that that's what they used in the ancient times. And the Papurul Apilis, that he says was he didn't find that they didn't find that at that time in the Mediterranean Sea, in the ocean. So he said that's not mistaber that they brought it in from somewhere else. So that's out. So as a process of elimination, he was left with the Murex Trunculus, which produced a violet bluish color. So that must be it. And so Rabbi Herzog brings this down, and he says, it's a nice svara, but we have Chazal and we have Torah, and it has to shtim. It doesn't just because of the process of elimination, it's mistaber that they did die in those days with this snail, that doesn't automatically mean that it's Techeles. And so he went through, Rabbi Herzog goes through the Simonim of Chazal, And he says, he goes through that there's this siman and this siman, and he says you have to go through the Rambam. The Rambam gives his simonim, and you can't just because they once died in the time and it was purple. The issue that it was purple of Herzog doesn't raise until later. He says, he'll live with that. There's maybe some people that say that maybe it's purple. He says, we have a Messiah that is blue. He goes, as every kid learns in yeshiva that it's a blue. So he says, but I have so many simonim in Chazal and so many simonim in the Rambam. And he goes through and he knocks off one, two, maybe one. He's masking that maybe it does shtim with Efsher. But other than that, he says it doesn't shtim with any of Simoni Chazal. So Rabbi Herzog discredits, says it's not negay, it's out. So what Yan? He said the Giantina. That he says, if anything, he says that has many of the Simonim of Chazal. He goes through that has 1, 2, 3, Rambam, everything. It seems to shtim with many Mekayos in Chazal. So he says that that's what he suggested it was, but they were never able to produce anything out of it, and so therefore he left it. And he said, hopefully one day somebody in some university or something will take up his idea, and maybe he'll be able to get out of it some blue dye. The Radziner, I spoke to two Mekayos, two people who are very well versed with this. One of them was the Radziner Zainikel, and one of them was Dr. Mendel Singer from Cleveland. And they both told me from different angles, but they both told me that it was clear that the Radziner Rebbe himself, who was working in Italy at that time for that year, and this came out maybe 30 years before that, this Hamza of this Dedkin. He says there's no question about it. Even one of them told me that he wrote about it. That he also brought up, maybe it's somebody sent him a letter. It seems that maybe it's the murex Struckless. He didn't even bring it down in his sefer. Any one of his three svarim, he didn't bring it down b'chlal, because he felt that mamish in the letter is something. The Einikol of the Rebbe told me he wrote back a letter. It doesn't shtim with any of the simonim of Chazal, and therefore it wasn't a gap. So what happened? And this was in the thesis he wrote in 1913. What happened to today? All of a sudden it became such an accepted thing. So in the late 1980s, there was a major breakthrough. And from that breakthrough and on, it seems that this is it. This is Klar, the Chilazim. B'Tz Hashem will continue to see what that breakthrough was.